Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly past the heavy wooden gates of a grand Victorian townhouse. It's still dark out. The streets glisten with last night's rain, the gas lamps sputter, and your breath fogs in the cold morning air. No one notices you. Not the milk cart rolling by. Not the man in the top hat hurrying to catch the early train. You're just the help after all, and it's barely past 5. You approach the back entrance, never the front of course. Your boots crunch faintly on gravel, skirt hems damp with dew. As you lift the iron knocker, worn smooth by dozens of other girls before you, the door creaks open from the inside. The scullery maid, half your age and already red-eyed from peeling onions, nods and steps aside. No words, just a passing of duty like a torch. You hang your shawl on the same crooked peg every day, tuck your fingers into your apron pocket, and take one deep breath. The house still sleeps, but you don't get that luxury. You move swiftly through the kitchen, still warm from last night's coal fire, and into the narrow hallway. First job, wake the fireplaces, all of them. There are 5 on the first floor alone, each needing cinders cleared, fresh coal fetched from the damp outside shed, and kindling coaxed to life with numb fingers. It's not glamorous, but it's urgent, because if the hearths aren't roaring by the time the lady comes down, someone's head will roll, maybe yours, so you hustle. Your breath catches with coal dust as you drag the heavy scuttle across the marble floors, careful not to scrape. In the drawing room, you kneel like a priest before the grate, fingers blackened before the sun even rises. The fancy velvet chairs and polished sideboards say wealth, but down here on your knees, all you see is soot, spiderwebs, and the tiny mouse skull someone left behind the coal bucket. Charming. By the time the first fire crackles, your back aches and your cheeks sting from heat and cold in equal measure. You move on. The library fireplace, the morning room, the master's study, where you try not to glance at the open ledger left on his desk, listing household expenses down to the halfpenny. Your name's not there, of course, just kitchen help, monthly. You're still moving when you hear the faint bell. The upstairs maid has started. Soon the others will follow, one for boots, one for washing, another for ironing. You're all gears in the same creaking machine, but no one outside ever sees it. They see the polished silver at dinner, the feathered hats at the opera, the fresh flowers in the parlour. Not the girl who trimmed the stems with cold hands at 6 a.m. And as you carry the ash pan out the side door, you glance up at the rooftop, where chimney pots belch grey smoke into a softening sky. The city is waking, but you've been up for hours. No one will thank you, no one will notice. But without you, the house doesn't breathe. You make it back inside just as the sun peeks over the rooftop, staining the upstairs curtains golden. But you won't be climbing those stairs. You head straight for the scullery, where the damp chill clings to the walls like mildew. Your breath hangs in the air. The basin is already full of yesterday's crusted pots, the copper kettle hissing faintly on the stove. Breakfast prep has begun, and there's no time to pause. The cook barks something about eggs and jam, and you nod, not quite hearing, already cracking your knuckles in anticipation of the next task. You peel potatoes without looking. You've done it so many times your fingers move on their own. You don't have to think, only keep up. Someone spills the milk. The scullery maid slips on it. No one speaks. There's no time for, "Are you all right?" Only towels, muttered apologies, and the quick swipe of a broom before anyone higher up notices. As the house groans to life, bells begin ringing through the service corridors. One short chime from the blue bedroom means the lady wants hot water. 3 in a row from the master's dressing room means his boots aren't yet polished. The bell system may look charming to outsiders, tiny brass dials pointing to each room, but for you, it's like being on a leash. You don't walk anywhere. You're summoned. You hurry to fetch the hot water can, still warm from the kettle. Up the narrow servant staircase you go, shoulders turned just so to avoid brushing against the wallpaper. At the top you pass a door left slightly ajar. You glimpse the governess, already setting out lesson books, her face pale and blank like a doll someone forgot to wind up. When you enter the lady's bedroom, she doesn't look at you. She just lifts her hand slightly, expecting you to read the gesture, set the water down, open the curtains, straighten the fringe of the chaise. Her voice, when it comes, is low and lazy. She's been awake less than 10 minutes, and already she's tired of the day. You finish your tasks and leave before she can find fault. Downstairs again, someone's shouting about the cat leaving muddy paw prints in the hallway. It's absurd, really. How many people it takes to keep this house looking like it runs effortlessly. You sneak a heel of bread when no one's looking. That'll be the only thing in your stomach until evening, unless you risk the leftover porridge the children didn't finish. You've done it before, everyone has, no one talks about it. By mid-morning the house smells like polish and starch. The floors gleam, the windows sparkle, and upstairs the lady is reading in her silk wrapper, sipping tea from a cup you scrubbed last night. Guests may be arriving soon, or maybe the vicar's wife will call. Either way, the place must look like no one ever worked here, as if the silver spoons scrub themselves, as if the coals leap into the hearth by magic. Outside, a new girl knocks on the back door, face thin, hands raw, voice too soft. You were her once, and now you nod at her like an old soldier welcoming a fresh recruit to a war no one admits is being fought. Because behind every closed door in this house, there is a woman working. Always. The laundry room is tucked far in the back, past the pantry, past the broom closet, through a wooden door that groans every time you push it open. It smells of damp wool, coal steam and carbolic soap. A little like medicine, a little like despair. You step inside, and the warmth hits you like a wall. Wet heat, not cosy heat. Your skin beads with sweat immediately, even though it's freezing outside. The big copper tub is already bubbling. Someone's been up since before you. You nod at the washerwoman hunched beside it, sleeves rolled up to the elbow, face red from steam and effort. She doesn't look up. She's wrestling with something heavy, possibly bed sheets, possibly one of those thick damask tablecloths with embroidery so fine you're not allowed to blink when folding it. Today is linen day. That means pillowcases, napkins, drawers and gowns. The piles are already sorted. You pick up the basket marked Delicates, Lady Clara. It's full of lace-trimmed underthings, silk camisoles, and one particularly daring corset you know she wears under her Sunday dress. You don't comment, you just begin. The soap stings your hands, you swirl the fabric gently, remembering that time last spring when you scrubbed too hard and tore the lace. You still haven't lived it down. Every item has a protocol. Boil the cottons, hand wash the silks, beat the woolens, stretch the stockings over drying frames so they don't twist like dying eels. You don't have gloves. Your fingers prune and redden. One nail is already split. Someone once said laundry was women's war. The enemy is endless dirt. The battlefield is slippery floors and scalding tubs. And the reward, if you're lucky, no complaints. If you're unlucky, your wages docked for a stain you didn't make. There's a window in the laundry room crusted with steam. Outside, the street is waking up. Delivery carts, barking dogs, the butcher boy whistling with his basket. Inside, you're rinsing drawers with rose water so they smell civilized. Someone spills starch. Another girl sneezes uncontrollably. Too much lie in the air. You laugh weakly together, a short burst of human noise, quickly swallowed by the room's damp hush. You shift to the wringer, cranking the iron rollers with your whole body. The corset passes through, slowly flattening like a pressed flower. You catch your sleeve once and jerk back in time, but you know a girl who lost the tip of her finger to one of these. They never hired her back. There's a heap of gentlemen's collars in the corner, stiff ones, high ones, white linen nightmares that must be washed, bleached, pressed and starched into perfect submission. One wrong fold and the master's neck will itch all day. He'll complain. The complaint will become your problem. Still, you press on. The copper hisses, the fabric sloshes, and your arms ache in that good, bone-deep way that says, you're still here, still working, still unseen. By midday, the real trial begins, the drying. The house doesn't trust you with an airing cupboard, and the weather's foul. No chance of hanging linens outside on the green. So you and the other girls string lines across the rafters above the scullery, pegging sheets and drawers where they'll drip onto the stone floor like slow, ghostly rivers. It smells like soap and wet wool and something vaguely human. Sweat that never truly leaves. You duck under the linens as you move, your head brushing against bloomers fluttering like flags in a storm. It's almost funny. Almost. Someone bumps into you with a stack of damp petticoats, muttering apologies. Her apron's soaked through. You take two, just to lighten her load, even though your own arms are dead weights. There's no time to rest, just the occasional moment when your hands are under water and your thoughts can drift. You think about the woman who wore these, about Lady Clara's laugh last night at dinner, about how she dabbed her lips with a napkin you starched this morning. You wonder if she knows how many hands touched her clothes before they ever reached her wardrobe. Upstairs, the parlour-maid brings down another basket, this one with a small tear in one chemise. You sigh. Mending work. You set it aside for later. No one else will do it, certainly not the lady. She wouldn't dream of darning a hem. That's your skill. Your quiet artistry. Your name isn't stitched into anything, but your work is everywhere. The steam thickens. You begin to feel a little dizzy, so you open the back door for a breath of air. Cold hits you like a slap. Across the alley, the neighbour's laundry girl is wringing out a rug with her bare feet in a bucket. She sees you and grins. You grin back. You're not alone in this. There's an entire army of women laundering the Empire's linens, out of sight and out of thanks. Later, when the linens are mostly dry, you begin ironing. The heavy black irons must be heated on the stove, and if you're careless, they leave scorch marks, brown shadows that don't wash out. You test each one by hovering your hand over it, just close enough to singe your palm if you misjudge. It's always a gamble. As you press out the final crinkles in a table runner embroidered with forget-me-nots, you wonder who stitched them. Some other servant? A girl in a schoolroom? A nun in a convent? Or maybe a woman like you, wringing her soul into small, beautiful things no one will ever see being made. And then the bell rings again. You wipe your hands. Laundry will wait. It always does. Because there's more work behind more doors, and you're expected to know exactly where to be, exactly when. And so you go. You leave the steam behind, but the heat stays with you. In your hair, in your lungs, in the curl of your fingers. Laundry day never ends. It only hides itself, folded, starched and perfect. You sit on a low stool in the attic workroom, a dull needle clenched between your fingers and a mountain of silk beside you. The sun filters through the high, dusty window in weak rays, catching on tiny motes of lint and thread drifting like ash. There's barely room to stretch your legs. The seamstress's table is crammed with bundles of unfinished sleeves, twisted bobbins, and pins stuck into a half-used bar of soap. This is where the magic happens, though no one calls it that. You've been working on Lady Clara's new reception gown for 3 weeks now. Pale blue silk taffeta with scalloped trim, hand-beaded neckline, and 27 covered buttons that run down the spine like vertebrae. She saw it in a fashion plate from Paris. Of course she did. What the lady wants, she gets. What she never sees is the aching hands, the midnight stitching, the pricked thumbs hidden beneath fingertip bandages. You thread the needle again, squinting slightly. The light's never quite right up here. Neither is the chair. Your knees crack when you shift. You know that if the hem sits 1 inch too high, or the sleeves gather wrong at the elbow, the whole thing will be dismissed as unwearable, and your work will be blamed. That's the thing about invisible labour. It only gets noticed when it fails. You hear footsteps overhead, likely one of the boys from the roof crew patching the leaks again. You ignore them. Instead, you run your hands over the fabric, smoothing it into place. It's soft as breath, and you hate how much you like it. You were a dressmaker once. Before this, before everything, before you needed a roof more than a signboard. In another life you could have opened a shop, had apprentices, designed gowns with your name on them. Now you hem dreams that aren't yours. Someone brings you tea, lukewarm, sloshing in a chipped mug. You thank her quietly. She's new, still hopeful, still brushing her apron clean every morning. You don't have the heart to tell her it doesn't stay clean long. You return to the stitches. A narrow seam, nearly invisible, hides a strip of interfacing. That's what keeps the bodice firm. You like the metaphor. Women, after all, are expected to hold everything together while being nearly invisible themselves. Somewhere downstairs, laughter bubbles up. The drawing room again. The ladies must be entertaining. You imagine them swanning around in layers of tulle, sipping tea, complimenting each other's trims. Perhaps someone will remark on Lady Clara's gown. So elegant, they'll say. So perfectly fitted. They won't think about you, but they'll be wearing you. That thought should sting. Instead, it gives you a strange sense of pride. You're not allowed in the ballroom, but your stitches are. Your work stands up straight even when you're too tired to. The bobbin thread snaps. You sigh and reach for another. Outside, church bells chime. It's almost 2, and you still have one more petticoat to repair before the dinner dress comes up for its final fitting. Later in the afternoon, the lady herself arrives for her fitting. She doesn't knock. She sweeps into the cramped attic room like it's her drawing room, bringing perfume, impatience, and a faint hint of powder trailing behind her. You stand quickly, wiping your hands on your skirt before she can notice the ink stain on your palm. The dress is laid out neatly on the mannequin. It glows in the light, pale blue and impossibly smooth, like the surface of a still lake. She doesn't comment on the gown, not yet. She begins with her own complaints. Her gloves are too tight, her ankles are swelling, the fish at luncheon was off. You nod where appropriate, the way one does with summer storms and hungry cats. Just let it pass over you. When she finally allows you to help her into the dress, it's like dressing a glass statue. You slide the bodice over her shoulders, mindful of every pin still in place. She gasps, cold, and shivers theatrically. You apologize, though. It's not really your fault. Nothing ever is, but it always becomes so. You fasten each of the 27 buttons slowly, carefully. They're covered in matching silk, and each one had to be hand-sewn, turned, and stuffed like a miniature cushion. She'll never know that. She just knows whether they lie straight. As you work your way down her spine, she begins to talk. Not to you exactly, more like aloud to the room, to herself. She frets about the guest list for tomorrow night's dinner, about which wine will be served, about whether her sister's new maid is a thief or merely French. You say nothing. That's part of the job too. When you finish the buttons, she walks to the long mirror. She stares, turning just slightly from side to side. You watch her face, not the dress. You can tell she's pleased. But of course she doesn't say that. "It'll do," she says. And just like that, 3 weeks of stitching, pinning, hemming, and bleeding into fabric is reduced to a shrug. She steps out of the gown and leaves you to hang it carefully in the muslin cover. Send it down for steaming, she tosses over her shoulder as she descends the stairs. Alone again, you exhale slowly. Your shoulders slump. You sit, only now realizing how long you've been standing. You run your hand along the hem, smoothing it out once more. One tiny stitch has come loose. Nothing visible, but you fix it anyway. Of course you do. Because someone will notice if you don't. Not with praise, but with blame. That evening, as the sun drops and the windows dim, you find yourself still seated beside the mannequin. The blue silk shimmers like water in the half-light. You whisper to the gown, just to hear your own voice. A private joke between you and the thing you made. Tomorrow it will swirl through a room lit with chandeliers. It will be admired. It will be touched, envied, even gossiped about. But no one will say your name. And so before you pack it away, you allow yourself one small moment. You lean close, brush your hand along the inside seam, and whisper it into the lining. Just in case the dress remembers. The kitchen is a world of its own, a kingdom of clatter and heat, tucked beneath the elegant floors of the dining room above. You descend into it as dusk begins to settle, just in time for the organised chaos of evening preparations. The cook rules here, a stout woman with arms like rolling pins and a glare that can sour milk. She doesn't shout unless it's necessary, which is to say, constantly. You tie on your apron, though it's already stained from earlier. The slate floor is cool beneath your shoes, but the air is stifling. A fire roars in the range oven, blackening the edges of the copper pots hung along the wall. You can hear the drip of broth, the hiss of fat, the dull thump of a cleaver landing again and again on a worn wooden board. There's no time for pleasantries. The menu for tonight includes roast duck, green pea soup, and something called aspic jelly that you're sure was invented as a punishment. Your job is everything that no one else wants. Peeling, gutting, scraping and stirring. Always stirring. The duck is your first victim. You reach into the cold bird and pull out the innards. Slimy, slippery, and somehow still smelling of feathers. You glance at the prep sheet. Liver for the pate, neck for the stock, heart, undecided. You wipe your hands on your apron and move on. Beside you, another girl is shelling peas with a speed that's almost violent. She hums under her breath. She's younger than you, but has already mastered the art of separating her face from her hands, smiling sweetly even as she guts a fish. It's a skill worth learning. The cook barks for the onions. You grab the basket and start slicing. They bite your eyes instantly, and before long you're blinking back tears that aren't all from the onions. You try not to sniffle too loudly. Last week someone got scolded for emotional cooking. The cook said it spoils the broth. You stir the soup with one hand while flipping kidneys in a pan with the other. Timing is everything here. A moment too long and the sauce curdles. A moment too short and the duck bleeds at the table. The lady will wrinkle her nose and the footman will glance at you like it's your funeral. In the middle of this storm you notice a strange silence, then realise it's because the aspic mould hasn't been turned out yet. You glance at it. Gelatinous, pale, trembling like a ghost afraid to leave its grave. You hate aspic. Everyone does, but the master insists on it, says it reminds him of Paris. You try not to imagine what else he picked up in Paris. Just then, the bell rings from the dining room. Time's up. The footmen arrive, polished and smug, to collect the platters. You help plate the duck, carefully placing the sprigs of parsley, as if that will make it taste like more than it is. You wipe the edge of the dish with a cloth before handing it over. Presentation is everything, especially when no one knows how close you came to burning the sauce 2 minutes ago. And just like that, it's gone. Up the dumbwaiter or through the door, off to be devoured without a second thought. You lick a bit of gravy off your knuckle when no one's looking. It's the only taste of dinner you'll get. Once the dishes leave the kitchen, the real chaos begins. You might think things would slow down. After all, the duck is gone, the soup's been served, and the aspic has, somehow, made it to the table intact. But no. Now comes the part where everything must be cleaned, cooled, and put away as if the kitchen had never erupted into culinary warfare. You start with the stock pot. It's enormous, heavy, and clings to every last speck of grease like it resents being scrubbed. You pour out the dregs, then haul it over to the basin. The water scalds your wrists, but cold water would be worse. Congealed fat never surrenders easily. Beside you, the girl from earlier is elbow deep in gravy pans. Her hair sticks to her temple, and she's muttering something about tripe being a form of revenge. You chuckle, but keep your head down. Laughter here is a rare and precious thing, rationed like sugar. As the plates return from upstairs, the real test begins. Did they eat it? And more importantly, did they finish it? You can tell how dinner went without hearing a single word from the drawing room. Clean plates? Good. Still half full? Someone will ask what was wrong. If there's a smear of untouched aspic left behind, you silently cheer. The silverware must be soaked, dried and polished until it gleams like new coin. Not just clean, perfect. Any smudge, any fingerprint, and the lady might accuse the household of slipping. Once, a spoon came back with a lipstick mark still faintly visible. The resulting lecture lasted 45 minutes. You remember because you timed it with a kitchen clock. You mop the floor next, sweeping up onion skins, breadcrumbs, and a lone carrot end someone kicked under the table. The floor is stained from years of boiling, baking, and bellowing, but still you scrub. Elbows bent, skirt hiked, knuckles raw. At some point, the cook disappears for a smoke or a nap, or possibly to cry into her apron. No one blames her. You take over the cooling of the jellies, watching the wobbly shapes tremble on their platters, like they know they're not long for this world. The smell of meat lingers thick in the air. You stop noticing after a while. The air feels thick with starch and sweat and the ghosts of onions past. You tug open a small window, letting in a sliver of cold air. It tastes clean, untouched. At the far end of the room, there's a cupboard you're not supposed to open. Inside, the cook keeps her private stores. Things like white pepper, nutmeg, and a bottle of Madeira for sauces. Sometimes, if you've done well, she lets you dip a finger in the jam jar hidden on the second shelf. Tonight she gives you a wink. That's reward enough. When everything is finally put away and the coals banked low, you wash your hands in silence. The skin is puckered and sore, and you swear you can still smell marrow fat under your nails. You don't even like duck. You leave through the back hallway, your footsteps soft and slow. Upstairs, the guests are still laughing. The lady is likely accepting compliments for a dinner she didn't lift a finger to prepare. And you? You gave her those compliments, one blister at a time. Upstairs, beyond the servants' stairs and the hush of the formal corridors, lies a room no one talks about much, at least not loudly. The governess's quarters. Not quite family, not quite servant. A strange in-between space that feels more like exile than employment. You step inside quietly. The room is small, square, and smells faintly of chalk, lavender soap and paper. A desk faces the window, piled with arithmetic books and ink-blotted spelling sheets. The wallpaper is peeling in one corner, and the rug doesn't reach the wall. But it's yours, at least for now. The children are already waiting in the schoolroom. You hear them chattering behind the door, sharp little voices full of mischief, secrets, and growing opinions. You smooth your hair and pinch a bit of colour into your cheeks. Not because you're vain, because tired women are less respected than cheerful ones, and no one wants their children educated by someone who looks worn. When you enter, they hardly look up. The youngest is busy dipping a biscuit into her tea, letting it collapse into the cup like wet plaster. The older two are squabbling over who gets the map of Africa first. You settle them with a quiet word, a raised eyebrow, and the well-worn tone of someone who knows how to command a room with just a breath. Teaching is only part of your job. You're a tutor, yes, but also a referee, a confidant, and, on bad days, a convenient outlet for their mother's discontent. She once accused you of letting them read dangerous novels because her daughter used the word yearn. You teach them Latin verbs and French grammar, but also how to hide a smirk behind a teacup and how not to cry when the governess says no. You walk a razor-thin line between discipline and affection. Too warm and you're presumptuous, too cold and you're heartless. You remember the previous governess. Her room was locked up for weeks after she left, though no one said where she'd gone. One day she was there, hair neatly pinned, a faint Scottish accent, always humming. The next, gone. A new footman mentioned something about a letter, or a cousin, or a scandal. You never asked. The children, though, are beginning to ask about you, where you're from, why you never go to town, why you eat dinner alone. You laugh off their curiosity, redirect it toward the French Revolution, or the parts of a tulip. But you can't stop the smallest one from watching you, like she's trying to see the story behind your eyes. You almost want to tell her, but you don't. Because that story isn't neat. It doesn't fit in a lesson plan or a recitation. It's full of cracked windows, unpaid bills, and a letter from your sister that you haven't opened yet. Instead, you smile and move on to handwriting practice. The eldest girl writes with a stiff, angular style, like her mother. The youngest curls her letters as if they're dancing. You correct them gently, fingers brushing paper, voice even and soft. The hours pass slowly but steadily. Outside, the sun begins to fade. You light the lamp, careful not to drip oil on the desk. Another hour, maybe two, and then you can retreat, not to rest, but to your own small corner where you can let your shoulders fall for just a minute. Evening falls, and the children are finally dismissed. You gather their ink-stained worksheets, stack their readers, and wipe a sticky jam thumbprint off the edge of your desk with the edge of your cuff. The schoolroom grows quiet, not peaceful, just emptied. The sort of silence that hums, not rests. You walk slowly back to your own quarters, your feet aching but not from standing. It's the ache of containment, of holding yourself tightly all day in a room where everything is measured. Your words, your movements, your smile. You don't get to unravel, you get to withdraw. Dinner isn't served to you, not really. A cold plate is left outside your door sometime after the family has finished. Bread, maybe some boiled egg, a sliver of ham if cook is feeling generous. You eat it sitting on your narrow bed, back straight, eyes fixed on the curtain that doesn't quite close. Through the gap, you can see the stars. Sometimes when you listen closely, you can hear the laughter from the drawing room floating up through the floorboards. Lady Clara's voice rings out bright and unbothered. The children's father, aloof all day, becomes suddenly animated after wine. Someone plays the pianoforte. You imagine them all glittering with candlelight, draped in velvet, sipping liqueurs. Down here you sip weak tea and reread the same novel you've hidden inside your Latin text. You keep your boots by the door, your hairbrush tucked neatly away, your letters tied in ribbon and never left in view. You live like a ghost in a house full of life. Because you're not quite staff. You don't scrub floors or peel potatoes. But you're not family either. You don't dine with them, don't walk in the park on Sundays, don't receive mail at the front door. You're neither here nor there, just floating in the margins of someone else's story. They call you Miss, but they never say your full name. You're a title, not a person. You once tried to sit in the drawing room during a rainstorm when the schoolroom's fireplace wouldn't light. You brought your mending. You didn't speak, just sat near the edge, needle in hand, eyes lowered. Lady Clara paused mid-conversation and asked, with a smile too sweet, if you were quite comfortable. You haven't done it since. Sometimes you wonder what would happen if you vanished like the last governess. Would the children cry? Would Lady Clara sigh and say, "Pity, she was doing such good work with the geography"? Would they even remember the poem you read to them today? The one where the woman turns into a nightingale? You tuck the book under your pillow. Tomorrow you'll teach them about rivers, or Roman roads, or something equally remote and unmoving. But for now you let your eyes close. Outside your door the house creaks and murmurs. Above you the family lives. Below you the servants clean. And here, alone in your box of borrowed light, you exist. Unseen, but necessary. The house is quiet again. Not the calm of peace, but the hush of things being reset. You move silently through the hallway with your sleeves rolled and your bucket swinging gently against your knee. The fireplaces have cooled. The dining chairs have been pushed in. The beds are still warm upstairs, but no one's awake to see what happens next. You pass the parlour, and a flicker of silver catches your eye. Someone's dropped a hairpin near the rug. You stoop, pick it up, and tuck it into your apron, not for keeping, just to hand it back later without a word. That's how things are done here. You're on late clean this week, which means two things: chamber pots and stains. You start with the master's dressing room. The scent of cologne lingers, sharp and imperial. On the dresser, a glass tumbler sits with a smudge of whiskey at the bottom. A cravat lies unfolded beside it, and the chair cushion has a dark impression where he sat. You don't touch any of it. You go straight for the basin. The water is murky, shaving soap and stubble floating in pale swirls. You empty it without flinching, hands steady from repetition. Behind you, the chamber pot waits. You open it, nose turned slightly aside, and carry it down the back stairs as if transporting crystal. No one talks about this work. It's as essential as it is unspeakable. The polite world pretends that ladies don't bleed, that children don't soil their sheets, that men don't leave hair, tobacco ash, and worse in their bedclothes. But you know better. You've wiped it up. You've boiled it out. You've watched stains bloom and vanish like secrets. In the linen closet you reach for fresh cloths. The shelves are stacked by rank. Fine damask on the top, rough cotton rags on the bottom. You grab one of each. You'll need both. Next, Lady Clara's dressing room. You knock softly, even though it's past midnight. No answer. She's long since retired. Still, you push the door open gently and slip inside. The room is a chaos of discarded silks and slipper scuffs. Her corset hangs from the back of a chair, the boning warped from tension. On the vanity, powder clings to a brush, and a bottle of scent has been knocked on its side, dark oil bleeding onto lace. But the worst is on the settee. A tea stain, large and spreading, almost invisible on the floral upholstery. You touch it. Still damp, you could ignore it. Pretend you didn't see. But it will set, and then it will be your fault. So you kneel beside it, pull out your little bottle of vinegar water and a clean rag and begin dabbing. Gently, rhythmically, with the kind of care usually reserved for saints or surgeons. The cloth darkens. You keep going. This is what it means to erase the mess of others, to leave no evidence that life is ever untidy. That blood exists, that wine spills, that people are imperfect. You've cleaned worse, a birth gone wrong, a dress ruined after a fainting spell. Once, you found a broken pearl, earring and a trace of lipstick on the back of the library sofa. You didn't ask, you just scrubbed. No one wants to remember. That's your job. You make the house forget. You wring out the cloth and pat the last of the tea stain dry. The settee will pass inspection now, unless the lady decides otherwise. You rise slowly, knees stiff, and straighten the fringe on the nearby cushion for good measure. Everything must look untouched, pristine, as though no one's ever sat here, cried here, spilled anything here. As you close the door behind you, a familiar tug of exhaustion settles between your shoulder blades. But the night's work isn't over. There's still the back staircase landing, where one of the housemaids mentioned a mark, which usually means something unpleasant that no one wants to describe. You pass through the narrow passage where the servants' bells hang like brass spiders, each one labelled with a different room. The bell for the nursery still trembles faintly. You pause. It's not your floor, not your job, but you listen anyway. Nothing. Just wind whistling through the chimney. You move on. The landing is dim, lit only by the flicker of a lantern set on a shelf. The stain is on the floorboards, brown, faint, old. Possibly ink, possibly something worse. You kneel again, your back complaining, and scrub it with salt and lemon until the grain rises and the scent of acid fills your nose. You think of the girl who worked here before you. She was cheerful, too cheerful, laughed too much. One night she didn't come back from town. People said she ran off with a tinker. Others said she'd caught a cough and been sent home. You found one of her hair ribbons weeks later under the floor mat. You never mentioned it. In this house, silence is part of your wage. You descend to the laundry scullery one last time. The floor is wet from earlier and your shoes slip slightly. You steady yourself on the washboard, the cold metal biting into your palm. You tip the last of the soapy water into the grate, watching it swirl into the dark. Before bed, you scrub your own hands with the leftover vinegar mix. It keeps the cracks from getting infected, you've been told. You've never seen a doctor. Not for a scratch. Not for the blister that once popped under your heel and bled through your stocking. You remember that day. The lady complimented your quiet steps. You didn't feel proud. You felt faint. At last, you climb to your shared room at the top of the house. The air is thin up here, colder than anywhere else. You pass by the others already asleep, curled like commas in narrow beds. You undress by candlelight, folding your apron neatly even though it smells like starch and smoke. As you pull the thin blanket over yourself, your body aches in places you can't name. Behind your eyes, beneath your ribs, under your fingernails. You think about the rooms you cleaned tonight, how they sparkle now, how no one will wonder why, how the world will assume they were always clean. And you'll wake in a few hours and begin again, your work already erased by the house's morning hunger. Because your job isn't just to clean, it's to disappear everything. Morning again, and this time you're summoned to the bedroom. Not for cleaning, not for laundry, for dressing. Lady Clara's bell rings twice, short, sharp, unmistakable. You tuck your hair back, grab the dressing cloths, and climb the servant stairs quickly, your steps light but practiced. She hates waiting. Her door is open, but only slightly. You knock anyway. "Come," she calls, and you enter. She's seated before the mirror, still in her nightdress, hair unbrushed and eyes puffy. The room smells of perfume, candle wax, and last night's brandy. Faint, but undeniable. The maid must have missed the decanter tucked behind the curtain, or didn't dare move it. Without a word, you begin. First, warm water in the basin. You help her wash her face, patting gently with a cloth. Then the brush, slow strokes from crown to nape, just as she likes. She doesn't speak, and neither do you. She winces once and you loosen your grip. Some days she likes it firm. Today is not one of those days. You lay out her underthings, fine lawn chemise, soft stays, silk stockings. She shifts slightly as you help her dress, arms limp as if it's all a bit too much effort. You catch sight of faint red marks on her ribs as you tighten the stays. Not from you, from years of corsets. They always leave reminders. "I have luncheon with Mrs. Ainsworth," she says finally. Her voice is dry. "And tea with the vicar's wife. Make sure the lavender walking dress is pressed." You nod. It already is. You pressed it last night, with your arms aching from a day full of coal scuttles and soapy basins. She doesn't ask. She assumes. You fetch her garters, fasten her shoes, and help her stand. She turns to the mirror, inspecting herself with clinical precision. You notice her fingers tremble slightly as she fastens a brooch at her throat. You step back, silent. Then comes the corset tightening, the dreaded part. You've done this 100 times, but each time is a delicate dance. Too tight, and she'll snap. Too loose, and she'll blame you for the way the bodice sits. You pull the laces steadily. She grips the bedpost. Her breath hitches. "Wait," she says suddenly, voice sharp. You freeze. Loosen it, just slightly. You do. Gently. She doesn't explain, and you don't ask. That's the game. You both pretend she's fine, that nothing's too tight, nothing hurts, and no one sees the tears that sometimes well up when the laces pull just a little too hard. Once she's dressed, she waves you away, already reaching for her perfume. You bow slightly, just enough, and turn to go. But as you close the door, you hear her sigh. Not the kind of sigh that means contentment, the kind that means she's tired. Already, and it's not even 10. You walk back to the hallway, arms tingling from tension, and shake it off. You've done this every day for months, for other women too. You've dried their tears, hidden their bruises, zipped their gowns over, ribs that couldn't quite breathe, and every time you've smiled, stepped back, and disappeared before the first guest arrived. You're not just dressing her, you're building her armour. The hallway outside her room is lined with faint echoes, heels clacking on marble, doors thudding shut, the rustle of fabric swishing like leaves. You pass through it quietly, arms folded and eyes lowered, the way you were taught. Visibility without presence. Always there, never noticed. You head next to the younger sister's room, Miss Edith, who insists on being laced up like a Grecian statue, but faints when the ribbons are pulled too tight. You knock once, no reply. You knock again. Still silence. You enter carefully. She's sitting by the window in her chemise, staring at nothing in particular. Her hair is half brushed, tumbling over one shoulder like an unfinished thought. When she sees you, she doesn't speak, just nods. The dressing routine begins again. Each step familiar, but each woman different. Where Lady Clara expects precision, Miss Edith craves reassurance. You talk to her more, softly, lightly, asking about the new hat she ordered, about the garden party next week. She smiles faintly. "I had a dream," she murmurs as you help with her petticoat, "that I wore trousers and ran down the road like a thief." You smile too, though you keep your face turned away. It's not the first time she's said something like that. You once caught her reading a copy of Jane Eyre hidden behind a book of sermons. She slipped it under the cushion when the governess walked in. As you adjust her corset, she bites her lip. "Not too tight," she says, as if remembering last time. You nod. But she turns anyway, just as you're pulling the laces taut. Your knuckles brush her back, and you feel a small scar just above her ribs. You don't ask. She doesn't offer. By the time the final button is fastened, she looks as she's meant to. Composed, demure, delicately restrained. A sculpture of fine fabric and expensive tailoring. But her eyes drift back to the window. "Do you think it's warmer in France?" she asks suddenly. You pause. "Perhaps," you answer. She nods slowly. "Maybe I'll go there. Someday. When I can breathe." You straighten her collar. "Would you like the pearl brooch today, miss?" She blinks, and the moment folds itself away like a secret letter. "Yes," she says, "pearls." You retrieve it from the velvet tray and pin it neatly just below her collarbone. Then you step back, hands clasped. She offers you a small smile, not polite, not distant, but real. "Thank you." You return it with a curtsy and quietly leave. In the hallway, you exhale. There's an art to this job no one writes down. The precise way to lace a corset without bruising. The words to say that feel like conversation but leave no evidence. The way to help a woman into a mask that makes her feel more real, not less. And there's a cruelty in how close you stand. Close enough to smell their perfume, to see the worry in their shoulders, but never close enough to be seen yourself. The world knows how they looked, but you know how they felt. The nursery door creaks as you open it, and for a moment the smell of milk fills your nose. Sweet, warm, and faintly sour at the edges. It's still dark inside, curtains drawn. The fire hasn't yet been stoked. But in the corner, in a cradle lined with lace and folded muslin, something stirs. You step closer and there she is, the baby, Lady Clara's latest, swaddled tightly, fists clenched, cheeks pink with heat from too many blankets. Her eyes flutter open, and she makes a small noise halfway between a hiccup and a sob. You rock the cradle gently, but she's not looking for comfort. She's looking for you, because she knows you're sent, not her mother's, yours. You sit, shift your shawl aside, and loosen the buttons of your bodice. The air is cool against your skin, but the baby is already rooting, lips puckered and seeking. You guide her to your breast, and she latches without hesitation. She's hungry. She always is. You hold her with one arm and steady your breath with the other. The wet nurse. That's you. Officially. Unofficially, you're the mother she knows. Lady Clara dried up after 2 weeks. Said the baby's cries made her nervous. The doctor nodded and said it was common, gently, as if explaining that some women simply weren't made for such primitive duties. And so you were brought in, chosen for your health, your age, your quiet. No one asked about your own child, but you remember him. His small fingers, the way he curled into you after feeding. The curve of his head against your chest. You remember the sound he made when you handed him over to your cousin, and the way your arms felt hollow afterward. You were told it was an opportunity, a good house, decent pay, warm lodgings. And it was. If you don't count the ache that lingers every time this baby opens her mouth to cry, and it's your name she calls, not her mother's. She suckles deeply, her tiny hand clutching your finger. Her eyes half close. You hum, just slightly, something your own mother once sang. It's not proper, but no one's listening. When she finishes, you shift her to your shoulder and pat her back gently. A soft burp, then stillness. You tuck your breast away, button your blouse, and hold her a moment longer than needed. Then you place her gently into the cradle, rewrap the blankets, and pull the curtain slightly to dim the light. You rinse your hands in the basin by the wall. There's a small mirror above it. You barely recognize your reflection anymore. Tired eyes, drawn cheeks, the faint curve of a smile you only wear when no one else is around. You tidy the nursery, repack the linen basket, fold the flannel squares just so. Someone else will take over soon, the nursemaid for the day shift. She'll tell the lady that the baby slept through the morning, that she's growing strong. No one will mention what made her strong. No one will ask about your son. He's 2 now. Or close. You wonder if he's walking, if he calls your cousin, Mama. You close the door gently behind you and pretend none of it hurts. The hallway beyond the nursery is dim, the gas sconces barely lit, casting long shadows that stretch along the wallpaper like ghostly branches. You make your way down, past the morning room and the servants' staircase, arms empty now, but chest still aching in a way no tea or tonic can fix. You head to the laundry scullery to wash your cloths, one for the baby's milk, another for yourself. This part isn't written down in the household ledger. No one charts how many ounces you produce, how long she nurses, or what it costs your own body to give nourishment each day without pause. No one pays attention to what's being taken. You scrub the cloths clean in silence. The water is cold this time, the fire's gone low. Your hands sting, but you keep washing. Milk clings to fabric in ways soap can't always remove. The stains stay, pale, persistent, like memory. After rinsing, you hang them to dry on a line by the window, next to a row of stockings and one of the housemaid's aprons. Out the window, the rooftops are beginning to lighten with the first blush of day. You know the baby will be waking again soon. They always do in cycles: hunger, sleep, silence, cry, and always you. Back in the kitchen, someone's begun stirring porridge. You catch the scent, oats and smoke, and your stomach turns slightly. You're not hungry. Your body's already been working all night. There's a kettle warming, and you pour yourself a half mug of weak tea. The tin of sugar is almost empty. You don't take any. Another girl enters the kitchen, older, eyes still puffy from sleep. She sees you and says nothing, just nods. She knows your shift, knows what it takes. You offer her the rest of the hot water. She nods again. No one here wastes words. By the time the rest of the house is waking, you've slipped upstairs again, unseen. The wet nurse isn't meant to linger. You're not supposed to hold the baby too long, not supposed to hum, not supposed to cry. You lie down on your cot in the attic room, alone for a few moments. Your arms still feel the weight of the child. Phantom warmth. You close your eyes and try to recall your son's face, how his eyebrows furrowed when he fed, how he once sneezed mid-latch and made you laugh so hard you cried. But his face is starting to blur. Time does that. Or maybe it's guilt. Sometimes you dream he's here, toddling into the kitchen, cheeks round, voice high. But you always wake up to the ache. The same ache the other nursemaids speak of in code, saying things like, "My back's sore today," or "I think the weather's getting into my chest." What they mean is, "My child isn't here, and I gave his milk to someone else." You fold your shawl beneath your head, trying to stretch out your spine. You've earned a few hours of rest if the bells allow it. You breathe deeply, feeling your ribs rise and fall. You try not to cry, not because you're afraid someone will hear, but because no one ever does. The attic rafters still groan above you as you stir from rest. But sleep was shallow. Your body never quite forgets to listen for the bell. You swing your legs over the side of the cot and pull on your shoes, the leather stiff with age and work. Downstairs, the scullery is already clanking with early movement. But before the pots, before the starch, there's something else calling. Mending. You carry a basket of torn linens and ripped underthings to the far end of the attic, where a low window filters in watery light. This is night work, usually, but the pile's grown large, and if you don't start now, it'll be waiting when you're too tired to see straight. You sit, thread your needle, and begin, one hem at a time. A ripped pillowcase, likely from a restless night or careless footman, a lace trim torn on a corset, a stocking with a hole near the toe. These are quiet wounds, silent betrayals, things no one notices until they snag, until they scratch, until they embarrass. That's when you get blamed, so you mend before the noticing happens. Your stitches are neat, invisible. That's the goal, to fix without trace, to make it seem like nothing ever tore. You're not alone up here. The others have tasks too. A girl with red knuckles is starching collars on the far table. Another is trimming candle wicks for the upstairs rooms. No one speaks. Not because you aren't friendly, but because words cost energy, and there's too little of that to spare. The work is repetitive, but it's not mindless. Your hands know the rhythms, but your mind drifts. You think of the governess 2 doors down, writing her lesson plans in the lamplight, of the nursemaid downstairs checking the baby's breath, of the cook already planning tonight's supper. You think of all the women in this house, each tucked into a roll like cotton into a mattress seam, soft, necessary, hidden, and for a moment that thought lifts you. But then the bell rings, not the sharp double chime from upstairs, the short, urgent tap-tap bell from the back stairs, the one that means something's broken, something's needed, or someone's in trouble. You set your needle down carefully, mark your place with a pin, and rise. You know the drill. You always do. The bell calls, you answer. Because even when the house sleeps, it hums, and you're one of the hands that keeps the rhythm. The bell signal sends a ripple through the attic. Not panic, just motion. You descend the narrow stair, basket left behind, and follow the thread of need through the service corridors, past the linen press, past the mop closet, until you reach the back pantry. There, by the door to the root cellar, stands the butler. His face is unreadable as always. He gestures silently to the kitchen hearth. A coal grate has come loose. Nothing dramatic. Just dangerous enough to burn someone, or to let sparks fall where they shouldn't. "Fix it before cook sees," he says with the weary tone of a man who said this sort of thing 100 times, and then he disappears, as if summoned elsewhere. You nod. Of course. So now you're not just mending hems, you're mending hearths. You kneel again. There's a certain posture to this house, bent at the waist, eyes lowered, hands working. The coal dust smudges your cuffs as you lift the grate and feel the heat still radiating from underneath. You grab a cloth and shift the iron back into its groove, careful not to let it clang. Cook hates noise when she's counting jars. Your hands burn a little. You blow on your fingers, then wipe them on your apron. No time for complaints. The job is done. But before you can rise, you catch a glimpse beneath the hearth. Tucked just beyond the bricks is a scrap of linen. Singed at one corner, crumpled. You reach for it, expecting a rag, but it's something else. A handkerchief. Embroidered. With initials. Not yours. You press it flat on your knee and squint. The stitching is delicate, slightly uneven. Not a professional's work. A lady's, perhaps. Practice embroidery. You recognise the initials. They belong to one of the upstairs girls. One who cried last week behind the greenhouse when she thought no one saw. You fold the handkerchief carefully and slip it into your pocket. Maybe you'll return it. Maybe not. Some things get lost on purpose. Back upstairs, the air's grown heavier. The halls feel swollen with heat, laundry steam and the scent of boiled meat. It's midday again. You've lost all sense of time except what your body tells you. Tired feet, sore wrists, a hunger you don't have the luxury to indulge yet. But the basket still waits. So you return. Thread, stitch, fold, pin. This time it's a pair of drawers with torn ties. You replace them with fresh cotton, reinforced with tiny cross stitches at the end so they won't tear again. It takes 3 minutes, the work of centuries. Because long after the dinner is cleared, long after the ladies undress and slip into gowns you've mended, long after the lights go out upstairs, your stitches remain. Quiet, unseen, pressed against the skin. You finish the basket as the sun sinks below the chimney line. Outside you hear the church bell strike 3, and inside you begin a second pile, because night is coming, and women like you don't get nights off. The parlour is aglow with late afternoon sunlight, streaming in through the tall windows and catching on the polished brass sconces and the dusty velvet of the settees. You step quietly across the threshold, carrying a small tray of handkerchiefs to be folded and placed in the rosewood cabinet by the door. But this isn't your usual domain. Today, you've been called here for something different. Lady Clara's companion has taken ill, or perhaps she simply fled the house for a week. No one says it directly, but the implication is clear. Her services are temporarily replaced with yours, you, not as a maid, as a substitute lady's companion. You're told to sit in the room and make yourself useful. 2 instructions that say everything and nothing all at once. So you perch on the edge of the stiff floral chair nearest the window, spine straight, hands folded, eyes lowered but not too lowered. You're to be visible but not prominent, present but not participating. Lady Clara sits nearby, flipping through the lady's journal with the same expression she wears when a dish is too cold. Mild distaste, smoothed over by habit. Across from her sits Mrs. Ainsworth, the vicar's wife, whose entire body seems sewn from starch and scepticism. "I do miss Eleanor," Mrs. Ainsworth says, sipping her tea. "So do I," Lady Clare replies sweetly. "But one makes do." Her eyes flick toward you, just for a breath. And there it is, the tiniest tilt of the head. A warning, be still, be perfect. So you sit and pour and listen. They talk about menus and migraines, about Mrs. Summersby's scandalous new bonnet, and whether gooseberry jam should ever be used in trifles. You nod when expected. You smile, faintly, when prompted. And when Mrs. Ainsworth asks you a question directly, you answer with practiced neutrality. "Yes, madam, the weather has turned cool." It's the safest thing you can say. Lady Clara rewards you with a faint upturn of her mouth. Later, you know she'll say you were satisfactory. High praise from a woman who once dismissed a footman for sneezing mid-curtsy. As the conversation drifts toward charitable committees, you sit straighter. This is where the undercurrent shifts. They're discussing a visit to the parish poor next week, a photo opportunity you suspect. But they speak of it as a duty, a sacred heavy burden borne by those born lucky. "It's the responsibility of women like us," Mrs. Ainsworth says, dabbing her lips. Lady Clara sighs. They do so love the canned peaches. You keep your expression still. You remember the last time you visited one of those cottages to deliver coal, not conversation. You remember the look in the children's eyes, not gratitude, just hunger. But none of that is mentioned here. Here, charity is clean, pretty, wrapped in cellophane and tied with ribbon. You're offered a biscuit from the tray. You take it with a murmur of thanks, break it neatly in half, and nibble. It tastes of butter and dust. Lady Clara begins talking about a new novel, something scandalous. The room warms with laughter. You laugh too, carefully timed, a half-second late. Just enough to show you're part of the room, but not quite in it. The mantel clock chimes. You have one more hour to sit as the echo of someone else. The hour creeps by like cooling wax. You sit still, hands resting lightly in your lap, as the ladies drift into a familiar rhythm of comparison. Who has the finest silver, who kept a French maid too long, whose son is speaking to which governess far too often. Lady Clara's voice lingers on her tongue like sugared almonds, sweet with a touch of poison. She compliments the dress Mrs. Ainsworth wore to the harvest supper, but you remember she mocked it upstairs only yesterday, calling it a lace curtain with ambitions. That's the game. You play your part. When asked, you pass the jam. When glanced at, you smile. Soft, steady, expressionless enough to be harmless. You say nothing more about the weather. Better not to risk wandering into opinion. Lady Clara eventually grows bored of the visit. You can tell by the way she stirs her tea longer than she sips it, by the slight roll of her eyes when Mrs. Ainsworth launches into a story about her maid mistaking lavender sachets for baking spice. But she waits, lets the woman finish, then closes her magazine with a sigh too gentle to seem impolite. "Shall we walk a bit?" she suggests, rising like fog from her chair. And now you're dismissed. You stand as well, offering a slight curtsy. Lady Clara doesn't acknowledge it. She rarely does. Mrs. Ainsworth nods tightly. You wait for them to disappear into the hallway before gathering the tea things onto the tray. This is where the invisible companion turns back into a maid. The teapot is half full, the sugar bowl nearly empty. One of the napkins has a smear of rouge on it. You fold it over to hide the mark and carry everything back through the servants' corridor to the scullery. On your way, you pass the butler, who raises an eyebrow. "So," he says, low and amused, "you're climbing ranks now." You offer him the same half-smile you gave Mrs. Ainsworth. When you reach the scullery, it's hot and bustling again. Pans clang, water hisses in the sink, and someone is shouting about a missing spice jar. You set the tray down, remove the silver tongs and rinse each piece one by one, returning again to the rhythm of service. Later that evening you pass the parlour again. The chairs are empty now, though the air still smells faintly of lemon biscuits and ladies' perfume. You pause for a breath, just one, and glance at your own reflection in the glass of the curio cabinet. For a moment it startles you. You look like one of them. Hair-pinned, back-straight, expression mild. If someone didn't know, they might assume you belong to this room. But of course you don't. You're not the guest. You're the shadow of the guest, the understudy of ease. You turn away, walk back toward the kitchen, and disappear once more into the warm humming belly of the house. Tomorrow another guest will arrive, or another companion will fall ill, or another woman will need someone quiet to pour tea, to nod, to hold silence like a silver tray, and you'll be ready. Because being invisible is still being indispensable. The nursery hallway smells like chalk dust, old wool, and something faintly sweet, possibly barley water or pear jam. You tread carefully, shoes whispering on the worn carpet runner as you approach the schoolroom. A faint hum of recitation drifts through the half-closed door, punctuated by the scratch of a slate pencil and the occasional sigh. Inside, the governess is seated stiffly at her desk. Her posture is textbook perfect, hands folded atop a thin volume of moral tales for young ladies. Across from her, two girls sit hunched over their writing slates, foreheads furrowed, tongues peeking from the corners of their mouths in concentration. You smile quietly. You've seen this before. In another house, another child, another lifetime. You're not here to teach today, not officially. You're here to fetch the ledgers. Lady Clara has asked for them. The small green notebooks in which lessons are recorded, marks tracked, behaviours noted in euphemisms like spirited or ungovernable. You wait at the door until the governess notices you, her eyes flicking up with mild surprise, though she says nothing at first. Only after the girls finish their sentences and look up does she nod toward the shelf. "Second stack," she murmurs. You cross the room quietly, careful not to bump the globe near the hearth. As you reach for the ledgers, you notice something tucked between them, a folded sheet of music, dog-eared and ink-stained. A simple song, not from the school books. Something old. Folk, maybe. You slip it aside, returning your attention to the task, but the children are watching you. "Are you the one who sings at night?" the younger girl asks. You blink. "No," says her sister before you can speak. "That's the wind in the attic." The governess says nothing, doesn't scold them, doesn't answer either. You retrieve the notebooks and give a slight bow before leaving. In the hallway, you pause. The door closes behind you with a soft click, but their question lingers, because sometimes, late at night, you do hum to yourself, while folding linen, while brushing ash from the hearth. Old songs passed down by women whose names you never learned. Songs about rivers, salt, leaving. Songs about waiting. Songs that no one upstairs has ever heard. Unless, of course, they were listening. You return to the main corridor, ledgers clutched tight. But before you deliver them, you detour down the back stairs. There's something else waiting. The eldest daughter, Florence, is in the drawing room. Alone, for once. She isn't reading. She's standing by the fireplace, turning the pages of a book she clearly doesn't understand. You see her lips move silently. Her brow creases. When she notices you, she stiffens, closing the book with too much force. "I wasn't," she starts. You shake your head gently. "Of course not, miss." She relaxes just slightly. You glance down and see the edge of a bruise along her wrist, half hidden by lace. It's old, faded, but you notice. You always do. She notices your gaze and quickly pulls her sleeve down. Neither of you says a word, but something passes between you, like the handoff of a secret, invisible and weightless, yet heavy in the heart. Later in the afternoon you're summoned again, this time not by a bell but by a whisper. The nursemaid finds you in the corridor outside the scullery, her face tight, her eyes flicking nervously toward the upper landing. "She's in a state," she murmurs. "Miss Florence, could you, perhaps, help?" It's not your job, not on paper. But in a house like this, paper means nothing and quiet competence means everything. You climb the stairs softly, the carpet muffling your steps. At the end of the hallway, Florence's bedroom door stands slightly ajar. You knock once. Silence. Then, barely audible, "Come in." You slip inside. Florence sits on the edge of her bed, back hunched, shoulders trembling just so. Not openly crying, she would never allow herself that luxury, but holding herself together with the kind of tension that cracks more than it bends. Her hair is undone, ribbons trailing like abandoned thoughts. She's clutching something in her hands, a small object shining faintly. You step closer and see it, the pearl brooch you pinned to her sister this morning, but this one is different, older, heavier. The clasp bent slightly out of shape. A family heirloom, maybe, or a gift, or a mistake. She doesn't look up when she speaks. "Mother said I held my violin wrong," she whispers. "Said I embarrassed her in front of the Ainsworths. She took this from me." She opens her palm, revealing the brooch fully. A hairline crack runs across the pearl surface. She said, "If I can't behave properly, I don't deserve nice things." You feel something inside you pull taut, an invisible thread snapping quietly. Not anger, not surprise, just recognition. You've known women who hurt themselves, and women who hurt others, and women who did both because the world gave them no other shape to fit into. You sit beside her, leaving a polite inch of distance. "Let me see," you say softly. She hesitates, then places the brooch in your hand. The clasp is indeed bent. You take your small sewing kit from your apron, always with you, even when you're not mending cloth, and use the tiny pliers to coax the metal back into place. It takes a minute, maybe two. When you finish, you hand it back. Florence stares at it, blinking quickly as though unsure what to feel. "Thank you," she murmurs. Not politely, not perfunctorily. A real thank you, carved out of a moment where she feels more girl than daughter, more herself than someone else's reflection. You help her pin the brooch to her dress. She chose deep burgundy today, a colour that suits her, but her mother dislikes. You smooth the fabric over it gently. "It doesn't look broken at all," she says. "No," you reply. "Things rarely stay broken when someone cares enough to mend them." The throat tightens around a breath. She nods. Then, because she's still a child despite the corsets and curtsies, she asks in a small voice, "Will you stay while I practice? Just for a little?" You glance at the clock. Somewhere downstairs there's a pot to scrub, a sheet to starch, a bell waiting to ring. But for now, for this moment, you sit in the chair by her vanity. She lifts her violin. Her bow trembles at first, then steadies. The first note is fragile, the second is braver, and by the third she isn't thinking about her mother at all. You listen until she finishes, shoulders sinking with relief, and only then do you rise, smoothing your apron. "No one will know you were here," Florence says quietly. You smile back. They never do. But for once it doesn't feel like erasure. It feels like purpose. You're sent out that evening with a mending basket under your arm and a shawl wrapped tight around your shoulders. Not for errands exactly. Lady Clara has decided her embroidery group should meet at the vicarage this week, and someone must accompany her with the lace samplers, fabric rolls and refreshments. It might as well be you. You walk 5 steps behind her on the pavement, head bowed against the wind, careful not to let the linen-covered basket knock your hip too loudly. The street is muddy from last night's rain, and the gas lamps flicker as dusk swallows the rooftops. Lady Clara glides ahead like the chill doesn't touch her. You trail behind, feet sore, glancing sideways at passing windows. Behind the glass you see silhouettes bending over supper, children wriggling in laps, an old man nodding by the fire. Domestic scenes, private, real. You blink and keep walking. At the vicarage you're told to enter through the side gate, not the front. Never the front. Inside, the women are already gathered. 4 of them this time, arranged in a loose circle around the parlour fire, their skirts ballooning like fabric clouds. You know them, not personally, but by type. The one with the sharp eyes who always corrects your stitching. The one who talks too loudly and drinks the sherry meant for later. The one who brings lace but never makes any. Lady Clara joins them with ease, slipping into conversation about colour work and Parisian hem finishes. You're given a stool in the corner, barely a seat, and the basket is opened. Threads, needles, hoops, patterns, the weapons of a very particular war. You begin working quietly, a sampler, cross-stitched initials in white on cream, subtle, almost invisible, like you. The women chatter on, but beneath the harmless talk about tea blends and coat linings, you hear the edge of something sharper. "Did you hear what happened to the vicar's maid?" one woman asks, her needle pausing mid-air. "Ran off with a soldier, I heard." No, dismissed. For being caught with a man after hours. They cluck, they frown, they shake their heads with solemn amusement. Then, as if remembering you exist, one leans slightly toward your corner. "You must know something," she says, voice honey-sweet but barbed. "You girls always do." You look up slowly, fingers pausing in their stitching. "I only know how to sew, madam," you reply. They laugh. Not kindly. Lady Clara doesn't correct them. She never does. You return to your work, but your ears stay open, and what you hear next is not gossip. It's information. Someone mentions Mrs. Arkwright's troubles, a euphemism whispered like perfume. Another speaks of a girl sent to her aunt's in the country for a few months, and then they move on to remedies, quietly, cautiously. Dill water, pennyroyal tea. A woman in Deptford who can take care of things with warm hands and no questions. You keep stitching, steady, focused. They think you're just the girl in the corner, but you're listening. You always are. The room grows warmer as the fire settles into a low, steady burn. Teacups clink gently, embroidery hoops shift from lap to lap, and the conversation, still laced in polite embroidery itself, begins to unravel at the edges. "Of course," says the woman with the lemon-coloured shawl, adjusting her spectacles, "one must be careful. That sort of knowledge in the wrong hands." She doesn't finish the sentence. You glance up without lifting your head. Her fingers move with practised ease, threading pale silk through muslin, but her voice is lowered, just enough to mean business. She isn't warning, she's gatekeeping. They go quiet for a moment, and then, in the kind of tone women use when pretending they aren't starting trouble, another asks, "Have you ever known someone to actually go to that woman in Deptford?" Lady Clara doesn't answer immediately. She draws her needle through a spray of green thread, slow and measured. Then, only once. The room stills slightly, not shocked, interested. "She never came back the same," Lady Clara adds. They all nod, not disapprovingly, almost reverently, as if speaking of a saint who survived martyrdom. You keep stitching. A curl of red thread in the sampler slips slightly off course. You ease it back with the tip of your needle. They don't know that the girl they're speaking about lived in the house next to yours back when you had a home of your own. She used to sing to herself while hanging sheets. Then one day she was gone. Your mother said she'd gone to see her cousin in the north. But the neighbour girls whispered other things. Deptford, Penny Royal, a house with curtains that never opened. You never saw her again. Now the circle of ladies lean inward again, voices low. One produces a folded scrap of paper from her reticule. A recipe, she says, passed from an aunt who once lived on the continent. You can just make out the words juniper, ginger root, rue. They trade knowledge like smuggled silk. They whisper as if afraid of being overheard, but you're sitting right there. They assume you can't read, or won't understand, or know your place too well to ever speak of it. But you do read, you do understand, and you remember everything. One of them laughs softly. If men only knew what gets sewn along with the hems. Lady Clara glances at you, and for the briefest moment her face flickers. Not guilt, not kindness, something older, recognition, as if, perhaps once, before the marriage, before the dresses, she was a girl who listened from the corner too. You finish your sampler, white thread on white cloth, barely visible unless held to the light. You hand it over, and no one comments. They don't need to. That's not why you're here. You pack the basket again, fold the scraps, stack the hoops, and rise when Lady Clara stands. She thanks the hostess with a kiss on the cheek. You thank her with a nod. Outside the wind has picked up. The walk home is cold, your hands numb beneath the linen gloves. Lady Clara says nothing until you reach the gate. Then, as you move to open it, she pauses and speaks without looking at you. "You didn't hear anything tonight, did you?" You glance at her briefly, then look away. "No, my lady," you say, "because that's how the world works. The threads that bind women together are strong, but they are always sewn in silence. It begins with a knock, quiet, late. Not the kind of knock made with confidence, but with desperation wrapped in lace gloves. You're in the linen room folding napkins when it happens. The housemaid finds you and whispers, "Upstairs, now." You hurry, wiping your hands on your apron. When you reach the nursery landing, the nursemaid is waiting outside a guest room, white-faced and jittery. She doesn't speak, just pushes the door open and nods. Inside, the air is heavy with heat and candle wax. The curtains are drawn. The fireplace is glowing low, more for comfort than light. And on the bed, propped awkwardly against embroidered pillows, lies a girl you don't recognize. Young, pale, sweating through her nightdress. Her lips are bitten red. One hand clutches the blanket with knuckles white. The other rests across her stomach. The governess sits beside her, trying to keep her voice level as she wrings out a flannel cloth. When she sees you, her face folds slightly, not with surprise, but with relief. "She's visiting from Bath," she murmurs. "Her parents are not to know." You nod once. That's all it takes. You've seen this before. It's not the first time a girl has arrived too late for questions and too early for ceremony. No one says the word miscarriage. Not here. Not in this house. But the smell in the room is sharp and metallic. and the basin beside the bed is half filled with red water. You roll up your sleeves and go to work. There are no doctors, no sterilised instruments, just you, the governess, and the nursemaid, 3 women bound by silence and necessity. You steady the girl's hand. She grips yours tightly. "It hurts," she gasps. You nod. "I know." You whisper as you work. Not prayers, not advice. Just presence, just breath. The governess brings warm water. You clean what can be cleaned, strip what must be stripped, and fold a cloth between the girl's knees to absorb what's left. She sobs once, then goes silent. Her hair sticks to her face in damp curls. Her eyes stare straight ahead. The nursemaid begins to cry. You don't. Not yet. There's a moment when the worst has passed that the room goes still. Not quiet, still. As if the house itself is holding its breath. You look at the bloodied cloths in the basin. You look at the pale girl on the bed. Then you begin to tidy. Because that's part of it too, not just the care, but the cover-up. You rinse the cloths in silence, one by one. The water turns pink, then red, then clear again. The governess burns the bloodied sheets in the hearth, feeding them in slowly like letters she wishes she'd never written. The girl on the bed has drifted into a shallow sleep. Her breath shallow, one arm curled over her belly like a broken wing. No one says a word. Because there is no script for this. You clean the basin, fold a fresh cloth beneath her legs, check the pulse at her neck, not because you're trained, but because instinct tells you to. It's there. Faint. Steady. Like the beat of a thread pulling through muslin. The governess stands, smoothing her skirt. "I'll write a note," she says. "Say she took ill from the train, travel exhaustion, or something suitable." The nursemaid doesn't answer. She's still staring at the ashes in the fireplace. You gently guide her from the room. Sometimes it's not the one in the bed who needs carrying. In the hallway, she finally speaks. She's just a child. You nod, because she is. No more than 16. With a hair ribbon still pinned to her collar. She didn't need a punishment. She needed a way out. But in houses like these, there are only ways through. You descend to the scullery and dispose of the water behind the coal bin, where no one will notice the stains in the drain. You bury the used cloths beneath the soot pile. In a few days they'll be burned. You return to your room smelling faintly of vinegar and blood, but no one will ask why. The next morning the girl is gone. No carriage, no trunk, no goodbye. Just her room stripped and turned. Her name doesn't appear in the guest ledger. No one mentions her at breakfast, not even Lady Clara, who stirs her tea as if she hasn't just erased a life. But you know better. You saw her, held her hand, heard the truth her silence screamed. That afternoon, you pass by the governess on the back stairs. She doesn't speak. But as you pass, she reaches out briefly and presses something into your palm. A strip of cloth, folded into a square. Inside, a coin. "She said thank you," the governess murmurs, already halfway down the next step. You hold the coin in your hand for a long moment. It's small, thin, but heavier than it looks. You wrap it in a handkerchief and tuck it deep into your pocket. Not for the money, for the memory. Because in this house, stories like hers aren't written down, but they are remembered by women like you. You're called to the carriage porch late the next morning. The weather's foul again, wind scraping through the mews, rain threatening at the edge of grey sky. Lady Clara emerges from the front door dressed in a travelling cloak and her best gloves, a lace veil drawn loosely across her face. She's heading out for her weekly charity visit, and you're to accompany her. Not for company, of course, for carrying parcels. You fall into step behind her, 2 paces back, with a wicker hamper in your arms packed with preserves, barley sugar, sewing needles, and bundles of old linen. It's all been arranged to look generous, though none of it would feed a family for more than a day. Still, it's more than most get. The carriage rocks on uneven cobbles as you rattle through the edge of town and into the poorer lanes where fog clings low to the windowsills. Here the houses are hunched, shoulders tight, chimneys leaning like old men. The children stare as the carriage passes, mud up to their knees, noses running, bare toes gripping stones. You look away before your expression gives you away. Lady Clara doesn't look out at all. She fans herself and speaks idly about last week's musicale. The carriage stops outside a cottage with a broken gate and a slate roof patched with tar cloth. You climb down first, sheltering the basket under your shawl as the wind kicks up. The vicar is already waiting. He greets Lady Clara with a bow and you with a glance. You follow them into the cottage, ducking slightly under the warped lintel. The inside smells of boiled cabbage and cold stone. A woman sits in a chair by the hearth, feet wrapped in cloth, eyes sunken and red-rimmed. Her husband is nowhere in sight, likely working, or gone entirely. A child peeks from behind a curtain, thin as a sparrow, a crust of something on his cheek. Lady Clara sets her gloves on the side table like it's her own drawing room. She offers the woman a tight smile and says something about Christian fortitude. You keep your eyes down and unpack the basket. 1 jar of jam, 1 roll of flannel, 1 pair of mended boots from the donation pile. Not enough. Not nearly. You glance at the woman again. Her hands tremble slightly as she lifts the jar. Her eyes say thank you, but her shoulders say this is a performance she's played before. Lady Clara chats a bit longer. Then, as if bored, she rises and adjusts her veil. She leaves behind a signed card from the Ladies' Relief Committee and sweeps out the door. You pause. Then you take a heel of bread from your apron pocket. Your own. You break it in half and place it beside the boots on the hearth. The woman doesn't look up, but she knows. You step out into the wind again, the rain finally falling in earnest. The vicar says something to Lady Clara about devotion. She says something back about sacrifice. You pull your shawl tighter and follow them to the carriage, water soaking through your shoes. No one says thank you, not to you. Back in the carriage, Lady Clara shakes her veil free of raindrops and sighs as though she's just emerged from a battlefield rather than a 2-room cottage. It's so important to see these things with one's own eyes, she says, though her gaze never leaves her gloved hands. It gives one perspective. You sit opposite her on the folding bench, clutching the now empty basket, wet hems clinging to your ankles. You nod. Not because you agree, but because you're not meant to do anything else, she continues, speaking more to herself than to you. There's such virtue in humility. Those women are so grateful. It reminds me how fortunate we are. You could say something if you dared. You could say that the woman in that cottage looked less grateful and more hollow, that her silence wasn't submission, it was fatigue carved into the shape of a smile. But you don't say anything. The rain drums steadily on the carriage roof. Outside, a washerwoman in a soaked apron hauls a dripping pail toward a doorway. Her baby cries from somewhere unseen. A dog barks. Smoke curls from a crumbling chimney. Lady Clara tuts at the smell. Honestly, I don't know how they live like this. You do. You did. And sometimes, when the wind comes through the attic eaves just right, you still do. When you return to the house, Lady Clara goes straight to the drawing room, casting her damp gloves onto a chair like they've betrayed her. You're sent to clean and store the basket. No word of thanks, no glance, just the usual assumption that what you carry disappears when it's no longer useful. But before you reach the scullery, you pass the housekeeper, who eyes your soaked shoes and the smear of jam on your apron. "Go change," she mutters, not unkindly, "before the footmen see." You nod, grateful for the cover. Upstairs, You wring out your stockings and sit on the cot for a moment, arms slack. That night, while brushing the library rugs, you find a scrap of paper tucked between the cushions. It's part of a sermon, torn from a pamphlet perhaps. Just one line, barely legible in smudged ink. Let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth. You fold it, pocket it, and say nothing. Because the truest charity in this house is the one that's never spoken, not with words, but with warm bread, a mended boot, a patient silence, and sometimes, just sometimes, with the simple act of staying long enough to remember a name. The hallway near the back stairs is thick with the scent of beeswax and damp wool. You're crouched in the corner with a stack of lace collars in your lap, mending the finer pieces that have grown thin at the seams. They're not from this household. These are extra, commissioned on the side by a dressmaker in town who pays in coin and discretion. You work by lamplight, hunched low to stay out of sight. Your fingers know this routine better than your own handwriting. Hem, turn, catch the thread, fold, repeat. Quiet industry, traded for pocket money that won't be missed and mustn't be found. A creak in the floorboards behind you makes you freeze, then relax. It's only Agnes, the upstairs maid. She leans against the wall and slides something from her apron pocket. A bundle. When she unfolds it, you see a line of doll-sized bonnets, stitched from spare bits of lace and fine muslin. They're delicate, absurd, and, frankly, beautiful. She's letting me sell these now, Agnes whispers. The dressmaker near the bridge says if I make 6 a week, she'll pay enough for a pair of proper boots by Christmas. You smile. Just don't let the housekeeper see. Agnes grins and nods, already knowing. You both go back to your work, 2 girls sewing dreams no one else knows about. Later you bring your lace to the kitchen door, where the butcher's boy waits for his tip. You hand him a parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. He doesn't ask questions. He's been paid to carry things, not understand them. The coins come 3 days later, hidden beneath the butcher's receipt. You tuck them into a fold in your pillowcase, deep behind the ticking. You count them once, twice, not for the total but for the rhythm. These are not wages, they're survival. You don't spend the money on ribbons or rouge. You spend it on needles, thread, and sometimes, when the bruising on your heel gets worse, a little camphor from the apothecary. You buy tin buttons in bulk and hoard bits of felt for patching. You learn to do without before you ever learn to ask. Tonight you stay up late finishing one last collar, delicate, scalloped, meant for a woman who doesn't know your name. As you work, you hear the bells chime midnight down in the drawing room. You stitch the final loop and knot the thread. Then you reach under the loose floorboard near your cot and slide out a bundle wrapped in old muslin. Inside, 3 collars, 2 lace cuffs, 1 tiny purse with coin, and your name stitched in red thread on the inside of each. Not for show, not for sale, but so that somewhere in the world, even if no one else remembers, you do. The next morning frost webs the window panes in delicate crystals, lacework drawn by winter's hand. You rise before the bells, the attic still cold enough to make your breath visible. Beneath your pillow, the little purse of coins is still there. You press your hand to it for a moment, just to feel the weight. Today is market day, and while you won't go, your work will. Agnes passes you in the hallway, apron stuffed with finished baby bonnets. You catch her eye, and she gives a small nod, triumphant. She's added a ruffle to one this time, a risk, a signature. Downstairs, in the warmth of the scullery, the cook is barking orders for stews and sweet puddings, but your task lies in the pantry. You sort jars by weight, check seals, and quietly patch a tear in the flour sack with a spare bit of linen. No one will know it was torn. That's the point. Later, while polishing brass in the drawing room, you overhear Lady Clara mention the new fashion in lace collars. Bigger, more scalloped. She says this with a wrinkle of the nose, but you notice she keeps flipping through the catalogue pages anyway. Perhaps next week she'll order one. Perhaps next week it will be yours. That night by lamplight you pull out your hidden muslin bundle again. Not for work, but for planning. You've added one more collar. This one has small, near-invisible initials stitched near the seam. Not yours, a friend's, Agnes's, a kind of signature, a kind of defiance. Because this isn't just sewing, it's a map. Each piece you make is a thread pulled towards something beyond these walls. A stall in the market, a room of your own. Enough coin to choose when you work, not if. Enough fabric to stitch a name people recognise. Maybe not loudly, but quietly, permanently. Your hands are sore, but the ache feels different now, like purpose, not punishment. You fold the new collar gently and add it to the pile beneath the floorboard. Then you sit back, listening to the house creak and sigh around you, its bones settling for the night. Somewhere, a bell rings faintly. A baby stirs. A window slams. Life continues. But under this roof, beneath all the laced edges and polished silver, a dozen secret economies are alive. Tiny rebellions wrapped in muslin, sewn into seams, hidden in hems. And you? You're not just surviving them. You're stitching your way out, one thread at a time. The widow lives 3 doors down from the grocer, in a brick house with ivy strangling the eaves and a cracked bell pull no one uses anymore. You've passed it a dozen times on errands, always noticing how quiet it seems, how the curtains never quite close, but no one ever waves from them either. This morning, the housekeeper sends you there with a parcel, 2 mended waistcoats freshly pressed. You're told the widow does fine needlework and occasional repairs for the house in exchange for coal and biscuits. A quiet woman, the housekeeper says, reliable, doesn't ask questions. You understand the language. She's useful. The air is cold as you walk, wind sneaking down the back of your collar. You carry the parcel wrapped in brown paper, one hand stuffed into your apron for warmth. The town is beginning to stir. Shop shutters creak open. A coal cart rumbles by. Someone is already scolding a child for tracking mud. You turn onto her street and knock lightly at her door. It opens a crack. A pale face peers out. Late middle age, eyes sharp despite the smudges under them. She sees the parcel and nods. No words, just steps aside. You follow her in. The house smells of lavender, candle wax and something faintly metallic. There's no fire lit, only a stub of a candle burning near the mending basket. She gestures to a chair and you sit, while she opens the parcel with careful fingers. "The stitching's good," she says eventually, voice low and gravelly. "Someone upstairs?" You hesitate, then nod. She nods back. "I did shirts for the old master once, before his lungs gave out." You wait. There's something here. Something beneath the surface of her words, like thread pulled too tight in a seam. Her hands move steadily, folding, inspecting. Then she reaches under the table and pulls out a box. Inside, work. Beautiful, difficult work. Embroidery, lace inserts, hand-darned cuffs so fine they could pass for new. But none of it is labelled. None of it is sold. Just stacked neatly in muslin. You can't help it. You whisper, "Why not sell these?" She doesn't look at you. "I did once. Had my name on the receipt. Man who bought it said his wife couldn't wear something stitched by a tradeswoman. Said it felt impolite." You understand. You ask if she needs help. She pauses. Then, "You good with buttonholes?" "You are." So you stay. For 2 hours the two of you work in silence. She shows you how to double back the thread on velvet without puckering the fabric. You show her how to reinforce a frayed seam with invisible stitches. When you rise to leave, she presses something into your hand. A needle. But not just any needle. One with a curved end, rare and difficult to come by. Meant for gloves. meant for delicate, curved seams no one sees but everyone feels. "Try it," she says. You nod. Outside, the frost has melted, but your hands are still cold. Still, when you reach the house again, you tuck the needle inside your pocket like treasure. Because the widow may not sell her name anymore, but she's just given you a piece of it. That night, you sit cross-legged on your cot beneath the low eaves of the attic, the little glove needle resting beside you like a relic. You turn it between your fingers once, twice, then thread it with care. The widow's method plays back in your mind. How she looped the thread just so, how she steadied the fabric with a curved palm, how her fingers barely moved, but the result was seamless. You try it on a scrap of leather, an old glove cuff you've kept for months, hoping one day you'd learn how to mend it. The stitches curve, slow and awkward at first, then smoother, then cleaner. By the fifth pass, you're starting to feel it. Not just the motion, but the intention behind it. You're not just repairing, you're reshaping. Below, the house groans softly in its sleep. Wind knocks at the windows and the coals in the range crackle down to embers. Everyone else is tucked into their own little rituals. Cook with her ledger, the governess with her ink-stained fingers, the nursemaid humming half lullabies into the baby's curls. But up here, in your slice of shadow, you're building something that doesn't belong to anyone else. A new set of gloves sits beside you. Well, not new. Stained, fraying, beginning to split at the seams, left behind in the donation box meant for the poorhouse, never claimed. You rescued them, not for pity, for potential. You begin reinforcing the thumbs, using the curved needle now like an extension of yourself. The thread slides smooth through the worn leather and the stitches hold, tight, clean, invisible. You smile, just a little. By the time you finish, the gloves have been transformed. Not perfect, no, but stronger, ready. You wrap them in a cloth and tuck them beneath your cot. You're saving them for Agnes. Her boots may come by Christmas, but her fingers won't last through November without warmth. And these could pass for new. And that's the trick, isn't it? The whole world believes it runs on what's new, what's whole, what's expensive. But you know better. It runs on what's mended, what's hidden, what's salvaged in silence. Before sleep, you pull the muslin-wrapped bundle of collars from beneath the floorboard. You add a note this time, not a name, not yet, just a symbol you've sewn into the edge of the glove cuff, a kind of signature, not one that anyone will recognize now, but maybe one day they will. You blow out your candle, the smoke curling like a ribbon into the rafters. In the dark, the house breathes. So do you. And somewhere in your chest, something stirs that feels a little like ownership. The lamp burns low in the governess's room tonight. You pass by her open door on your way to return a folded tablecloth and see her hunched over a sheaf of papers, lips pursed, fingers ink-stained. She doesn't see you. Or maybe she does, and just chooses not to look up. You hesitate, then knock, just once. She glances up, startled, then sighs. "Oh, it's you." You step in lightly, careful not to let your shadow fall across her desk. Her room is smaller than yours somehow, though her status sits higher on the household ladder. The wallpaper curls at the corners. The only luxury is a small writing desk crowded with books, lesson plans, and a battered oil lamp that flickers with every gust. "I didn't mean to disturb," you say. "No, stay. I could use your eyes." She pushes a page toward you. It's a letter, neatly written with just a few crossed lines, but the name at the bottom catches your breath. F. Ashcroft, Escam. She watches you carefully. "I'm submitting it under his name," she says. "It's the only way they'll publish it." You glance again at the text. It's not a story. It's a column. Short, direct, clever. Advice on managing unruly pupils with just enough wit to make it seem light-hearted. It's brilliant. You feel it in your chest. I've written 5, she continues. 3 were accepted. No payment yet, of course, but it's something. You nod. You don't trust your voice just now. She takes a sip of tea gone cold and leans back in her chair. Her expression shifts, less tired, more defiant. When I was 17, she says, I wanted to write for the Times. My uncle said I'd do better learning to play the pianoforte and smile, so I wrote under his initials instead. She reaches into a drawer and pulls out a thin booklet. Inside, printed on cheap paper, are short essays and stories. Some are marked only FA, others anonymous. She flips to one. The Cost of Silence in a House of Noise. You read the first line. Some women speak through the way they fold linen, others in the thread they choose to mend a cuff. You meet her eyes. You know, she says softly, I think there are more of us than they realise. You nod again. She smiles, tight, real. Then gestures to a stack of blank paper on the corner of her desk. If you ever feel like writing something, she says, my door is unlocked after supper. You don't answer, not with words, but you reach out, touch the corner of the page and feel something in yourself shift. Because this house may only know you as Hands, but here, in this quiet, ink-stained room, you are Voice. You leave the governess's room with your mind still buzzing, not from the oil fumes or the candlelight, but from the sensation of possibility. It follows you down the servants' corridor like a hum under your skin. You've been surrounded by unspoken things for so long that hearing someone say it, write it, feels like air after drowning. Back in your attic corner, you light your own stub of candle and pull a worn piece of linen from the bottom of your basket. Not for mending this time, for writing. You don't have paper, but you've learned that words can cling to any surface if the meaning is strong enough. You sharpen a stub of pencil with your sewing scissors. The tip splinters, but it holds. Then slowly, carefully you write. What if the most powerful women are the ones no one sees? It looks strange, your own thought in your own hand. You fold the cloth, slide it into the lining of your stays. No one will find it there. It's yours. Over the next few nights you return to the governess's room, not as a maid, but as a conspirator. She makes weak tea and offers you scraps of paper torn from the backs of old ledgers. You bring her your best sentences, born from hours of quiet thinking while scrubbing grates or hemming sleeves. You write about the patterns of conversation in the drawing room, how a woman can be both praised and diminished in a single compliment. You write about Agnes's baby bonnets, about the widow with the glove needle, about the girl who disappeared after the accident. No names, just truths. The governess reads them with a finger resting gently on her chin. Sometimes she smiles, sometimes she winces, always she nods. You've got rhythm, she tells you once, tapping the paper like a piano key. It's in your stitching too, no surprise. One evening she slides a fresh envelope across the desk. You pick the name, she says. We'll submit it together. Your heart stutters. You think of a dozen names that aren't yours, then settle on one that is almost a memory from your grandmother, a pet name your sister once gave you. Something quiet, something safe. The letter is posted 2 days later, slipped into the outgoing mail with the household bills and society RSVPs. No one notices. No one ever does. But that night, when you climb into bed, the air feels different. You're still in the attic, still a servant, still faceless to most of the house. But somewhere, out there, your words are travelling through the world, folded in paper, inked in your rhythm, signed with your ghost. You sleep with your hand over your ribs where the linen scrap is hidden, not because you fear losing it, but because it's the first thing that ever truly belonged to you. You don't come down to breakfast the next morning. You say you're unwell, and in truth, you are. Though not with fever, nor with chills, nor even the usual fatigue that settles in your bones like ash. You're sick of the weight, of the rolls, of the hours spent tightening stays and sewing hems and saying yes, miss, to girls who weep behind locked doors but won't meet your eye in daylight. So you stay in bed, just for today. You wrap your shawl around your shoulders, light the candle and curl under the attic eaves where the wind whistles through a crack in the bricks. You hold the linen scrap in your hand, your writing from last night softening with handling. You think about what you've written and what you haven't yet dared to. The thing is, you could do this every day. Not just stitch, not just serve, but refuse. Quietly. Refuse to rise. Refuse to answer the bell. Refuse to make yourself small for someone else's comfort. You lie back, close your eyes, and pretend for a full 10 minutes that you are sickly, fragile, unfit for duty. It's surprisingly easy. When the housemaid comes up to check on you, you cough gently and say your head hurts. She offers you a dish of broth. You thank her. She doesn't ask questions. She's done the same before, you realise. Taken to bed with no cause but the need to be left alone. You sip slowly, the warmth spreading through your belly. Outside the window, pigeons flutter past the rooftops. Chimneys belch their grey smoke. The bells continue to ring without you. The world turns, and it doesn't fall apart. By midday, the ache behind your eyes fades. Not because it's gone, but because it's rested. You stretch under the thin blanket and let the hours slip by. You nap. You reread your scraps. You mend nothing, cook nothing, dress no one. You do nothing useful, and still the house carries on. When twilight falls, you rise and dress slowly, fingers moving without rush. You brush your hair in silence. You look into the cracked mirror nailed to the attic wall, and for the first time in weeks, your face doesn't look hollow, it looks defiant. Downstairs, the cook mutters about you missing the silver polishing. The housekeeper makes a note in her ledger, but no one scolds you, no one sends you away. Because women here do fall ill. Sometimes. And sometimes they're not ill at all. They're tired of the script. You return to your cot that night with something new inside you. A sliver of rebellion. Sharp, quiet, and utterly your own. You've always followed the rules. But now you know how it feels to step outside the frame, even just for a day. And the next time someone calls you strong, you'll smile, because they don't know your greatest strength isn't what you endure. It's what you choose not to do. The next morning you return to your duties, not because guilt claws at you, or because someone made a threat, but because the choice is yours now. The act of stepping away, even briefly, has rewritten something deep in your bones. You no longer move from obligation alone. You move because you decide to. And with that shift, the work feels different. You polish the banister slower, noticing how the wood grain swirls like water. You fold linen with an extra crease, not for the mistress, but for your own sense of control. You answer bells, yes, but with a gaze that holds just a bit longer. Not insolence, just presence. At midday you see Clara, the kitchen maid, staring blankly at the ash bucket. Her apron is streaked with soot and her hands are red raw. You tap her shoulder and nod toward the scullery. 10 minutes, you say. I've got the rest. She hesitates, then disappears without a word. You don't explain yourself to cook. You just rinse the pail and keep moving. And for the first time, you feel the quiet power in stepping into someone else's stillness. Because rest doesn't have to be hoarded. It can be shared. That evening in the attic, the governess knocks. Rare for her. You open the door and she holds out a letter. Her face is unreadable. You take it carefully. The envelope is pale blue, the script unfamiliar. Inside, Your article. Printed. Typeset. Inked. It's there. Your words. Your rhythm. A different name at the bottom, of course, but the voice is yours. The governess doesn't speak. She just watches you read the first line aloud. You do, and your hands don't tremble. When you're done, she leaves. You stand there for a while, holding the letter like it might melt. The candle flickers low, the room is quiet, and you begin to understand something. Not every act of defiance needs to be loud. Some rebellions live in rest days, some in borrowed pens, some in shared silence between women who've been told to stay small. The world might never know what you've done, but your body knows, your voice knows, and somewhere out there someone is reading your words tonight, not knowing who you are, not knowing how you wrote them in the attic of a grand house, with tired hands and a bent back and a name that wasn't your own. But the truth? You're more than that name. You always were. You always will be. You didn't mean to become the one they whispered about, but somehow you did. It starts with a glance in the laundry room. A scullery girl asks if it's true, that you missed a day and didn't get docked wages. You don't answer. You just smile and keep folding sheets. Later, the upstairs maid lingers beside you in the hall and mutters, "I heard about your writing." She doesn't say more. You don't confirm. But something passes between you, a thread of recognition. One by one, the whispers grow legs. They don't come with scorn. They come with curiosity, admiration even. You haven't changed your uniform. You haven't spoken out. And yet, your presence has shifted. And now you begin to notice them too. The parlour maid who carries a sketchbook in her apron. The laundry girl who mutters poetry while she scrubs. The cook's assistant who hums opera beneath her breath when no one listens. They've all been doing it. Quietly, behind closed doors, just like you. One evening, in the back stairwell, you find a scrap of paper tucked into the balustrade. It's a poem. Clumsy. Sweet. Probably from Clara. Another time, a charcoal sketch of the butler's scowl is folded into the dishcloths. That's surely Alice's handiwork. The attic girls are sending signals, and you respond. You leave one of your scraps in the hollow of the banister post. A line from a letter tucked beneath a tea tin. A rhyme about chamber pots and snoring housekeepers that makes the scullery maids wheeze with laughter when they find it. It becomes a game, a ritual, a rebellion with no name. It spreads. Soon, even Agnes starts looking under stair treads for a joke or a verse. She never says anything. But you catch her smile once while carrying coal to the parlour, and that's enough. The governess begins leaving you ink. Small gifts appear in the night. A hair ribbon, a smooth stone, a bit of silk thread. Nothing valuable, everything meaningful. The attic is no longer just a place to sleep. It's a message board, a confessional, a kingdom made of scraps and secrets. You didn't mean to lead it, but here you are, and for the first time in your life the idea of leadership doesn't sound like power or punishment. It sounds like trust, like shared breath in dark corners, like safety, not from the world, but from being alone in it. You're sweeping the front hallway one morning when Mrs. Graham, the housekeeper, stops beside you. Her hands are clasped tightly, her eyes shadowed beneath the brim of her bonnet. She looks down, then clears her throat. "There's ink stains in the back stair linen," she says. "Again." You brace for a reprimand. You've always been careful, wiping nibs clean, blotting thoroughly. But maybe someone else wasn't. Maybe Agnes finally got bold with her sonnet. You open your mouth to reply, but she doesn't wait. "I'm not asking," she says. "I'm telling you to be more careful." Then, lower, so low you almost miss. She adds, "but don't stop." And she walks away. You stand frozen, broom in hand, as the grandfather clock ticks behind you. A maid breezes past, humming the tune of the satirical lullaby you left in the pantry. Upstairs, you hear a bell ring, but no one rushes to it. Everyone's listening for something else now. That night, in the attic, the scraps are waiting for you. 3 new ones. One is a sketch of a woman holding a quill like a sword. Another is a recipe written in meter. The third, unsigned, is a single line. Even caged birds remember the wind. You don't cry, but your throat tightens. You spend the next hour writing, not for publication this time, but for the attic. You write for the ones who will read by moonlight under blankets after 14-hour shifts. You write for the hands that ache, the minds that wander, the feet that shuffle in silence but dream in full colour. This house isn't just a place of labour anymore. It's a living archive of hidden hopes, of whispered truths, of women who never stopped making things, even when the world tried to take their hands away. And it's not just this house. The footman in the next estate brings you a folded note. A cousin's cook sends word. The governess's sister teaches at a girls' school in Leeds and has started collecting anonymous verses from servants of spirit. It's spreading. It always had the power to. All it needed was a crack in the wall, and you, without quite knowing it, became that crack. Not because you shouted, but because you didn't stay quiet where it mattered. The ink-stained linen, the rhyme about rotten apples, the story smuggled into a jar of marmalade. These aren't accidents, they're a movement. And though you're still called by a bell, still sleep on a cot, still answer to names not your own, you know the truth. You've made something bigger than this house, and it's only just begun. You step out into the early light, the frost still clinging to the iron railing, the sky the colour of porcelain. You've risen early, even for you, but not for work this time. Not to scrub or mend or stitch. You're heading to the post office. The letter in your apron pocket is creased from being reread too many times. It's for someone you've never met. Miss C, who runs a small school in a northern town and has written via a borrowed address, asking if the attic girls would send her more verses. She says her students have begun passing them around, copying them, speaking them aloud. She calls them the attic sermons. You almost laugh at that. Sermons. As if the joke about the master's wig or the ode to lye soap could be sacred. But maybe, in their own way, they are. You slide the letter into the red box and exhale. There. Sent. By the time you return, the house is awake. Boots clatter on tile. The cook is already shouting about the delivery boy's lateness. The back hallway smells of coal and fresh bread. It should feel like slipping back into routine. But something's different. Because now you walk through this house like someone who knows its every crack and secret. Not just the plumbing quirks or which windows rattle in a breeze, but the hidden network of hands, minds and laughter stitched beneath the wallpaper. You pause in the upstairs hallway, where the governess passes by with her satchel. "Have you read the latest?" she asks, almost offhand. You nod. "It's a good one," you murmur. "I like the bit about the brass buttons." She smiles. "That was mine." It's quiet again, but not empty. Everywhere, the house breathes with shared understanding. Downstairs, the scullery girl hums as she polishes spoons, an old tune, but the rhythm now carries a rhyme you wrote. The linen room girls speak in code. Leave the starch beside the lemon, which you know means there's a new one tucked in the third drawer. Even Agnes, of all people, has stopped grumbling about idle scribblers. She hands you a pair of gloves one day. Wool, gently worn, warm. "I knitted them too small," she says stiffly. "Might fit you." You say thank you, but you know they were meant for you from the start. You begin to write more, not out of desperation or loneliness, but out of joy. It's not just expression now, it's contribution, it's legacy. The attic has become a kind of press, a place where ink and fabric and humour and truth meet. One evening, someone pins a line above the wash basin. We do not whisper because we are afraid. We whisper because it travels further. And suddenly you understand everything you've built. You haven't just created a space to survive. You've created a way to endure and to echo. The house is quiet tonight. Not the usual hush of a late hour with ticking clocks and faraway snores. This is the hush of completion, of something settling into place. You lie on your narrow cot in the attic, staring at the slanted beams above. The moonlight cuts a thin silver line across the ceiling. Below, the city sleeps, or tries to. Somewhere out there, someone else is writing by candlelight. You can feel it. Next to you, tucked beneath your blanket, is a stitched bundle of papers. Every scrap, every rhyme, every drawing. A record of the women who lived here. Not just worked here, but lived. Their humour, their rage, their softness, their wit, and your voice, woven through it all like thread through a seam. Earlier today, the mistress of the house handed you an envelope. Thin, cream-coloured. A woman in town is looking for someone to assist in her new lending library. She asked for someone literate, the mistress said. I thought of you. You didn't say yes, not yet. But you didn't say no either. Because now you have options. Not freedom in the grand sense, but space, a foothold. A door you helped unlatch with nothing more than paper and ink and courage you didn't know you had. Outside the attic window a star blinks. Inside the others breathe around you. Clara, murmuring in her sleep. Alice, curled like a cat. And at the far end, a new girl, quiet, shy, with a bit of chalk in her apron pocket. You saw her doodling a bird on the cellar wall. She doesn't know yet that you saw, but she will. She'll find your note tomorrow. Welcome to the attic, and she'll answer. Because now this isn't just a place where things are endured, it's a place where things are remembered and passed on, even if the world outside never sees it. Even if history forgets the names, you won't, and neither will she. The house grows still. You shift beneath your blanket, the night wrapping around you like a soft shawl. The air is cool, but not unfriendly. Somewhere below, the embers in the kitchen stove are fading, and the last creaks of footsteps have long since gone silent. Everyone is resting now. Everyone but you. You lie quietly, listening to the attic breathe. It's not just wood and dust anymore. It's something more, something living. A gentle hush that holds every whisper, every hidden verse, every trace of laughter shared behind closed doors. You think of the ink stains on your fingertips, the tiny smile Agnes gave you, the bird drawn in chalk. These small things, so easily overlooked, somehow carried more weight than the grandest speeches or finest silks. And that's the truth you carry with you now, that real strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it scribbles, sometimes it hums, sometimes it passes quietly from one tired hand to another saying, I see you, I hear you, you matter. Outside the sky begins to shift, not yet dawn but close. The stars blink slower. The world is ready to turn again, but you're not rushing anywhere. Tonight, you've earned your rest. So breathe deep. Let the quiet hold you. And remember, even in the smallest corners, behind the heaviest doors, there is always a spark, one that waits for you, one that's yours to carry,